and tell us your role and title, if you had one, at that time with SNCC.
Well, my name is James Bond. I'm Julian Bond's brother, and my sister Jane Bond Moore was also involved in the movement and involved in SNCC. And we also lived right near Spelman College, where I live today, right across the street actually from Spelman. Basically on Morehouse College campus. The schools have expanded a lot since we grew up, so they're all around us now. But at the time, we lived right in the neighborhood, so we were in touch with people there. And I went to Booker T. Washington High School until the 10th grade, and then went away to high school in Massachusetts to a private school, and repeated the 10th grade in 1963. I graduated in June, and then in August, I went to the March on Washington. And because Julian was a publicity director for SNCC, we were right up front, right up where the people were speaking. So it was quite an experience for me to get involved in that. And of course, I've been in touch with Julian all the time. He was back in Atlanta, and Jane, working on the movement. And I remember at the March on Washington, the main thing I remember is that people objected to John's speech because he said, we're going to march through the South nonviolently like Sherman did and bring peace to the South. And particularly an archbishop from New York objected to that and said he wouldn't appear at the march unless they changed the speech. So John changed it, but Julian had already passed out printed copies of the speech, so it really didn't do any good to censor it. And then, of course, Dr. King's speech was there, and I remember Dr. King was giving a long, really boring speech about economics and about the South, and Mahalia Jackson said, "Tell him about the dream, doctor." So he went into the "I had a dream" speech. It wasn't really prepared for that, and just knocked everybody out. It was just very, very moving. So that was a great time. And then after that, I went back to college for a couple months, and then quit and came back south and worked in the SNCC office on Raymond Street, and mainly in the print shop. But we used to be friends with and meet all the people coming through that were going to other states, and most of the student movement in Atlanta had happened by then. So we were involved in printing material, reports and press releases and posters and things like that to send out to the field offices, and really ran the press 24 hours a day almost. We just had little small, almost like mimeograph machines, small printing presses, and printed material like that. So.
Did you have to coordinate with the Atlanta Inquirer in sending out some of your communications from SNCC?
Yes. Well, we also had telephones where we would call out if something happened that had to be given to the press right away. We would sit down. We had a list of radio stations around the country, and we would send them feeds. We'd get quotes from people from the site where it happened and from Atlanta, and send them out to people over the phone, and send out press releases to the Inquirer. Later, Julian became the editor of the Inquirer, and so I worked with him some there. Also knew a friend of mine, Boyd Lewis. Well, I guess that was later on, worked at the Atlanta Voice. But we did a lot of work with the Inquirer and the Atlanta Voice during the Civil Rights Movement, just to get people organized. And that was really the only way black people could get news, was from the Inquirer and the Voice and the black papers, the Atlanta Daily World. except that, you know, the Atlanta Daily World was run by Scott, who was a Republican. Although he was very supportive of the civil rights movement, he didn't have the same voice we had. So.
Let's talk about the inspiration for a landmark Supreme Court case, and don't worry about the big fancy title. The sit-ins, the rallies, the marches around Pickwick and the Heart of Atlanta Motel that you know of people who participated in.
Right. Well, the Pickwick was Lester Maddox Hotel, restaurant. He ran that with an iron fist, and he was famous because he had axe handles that he kept people away from it from. It was over where I guess mostly Georgia Tech is now. It was over near Georgia Tech at the time, and Georgia Tech has expanded probably to take over the spot where it was. And I did have one friend who was very active in SNCC, Mindy Samstein, who's from New York, who's passed away now. But I remember he went over there and sat in and gotten beaten by Lester Maddox with pickpacks, and he was, you know, hurt, but not very seriously hurt. But that did happen. And then Lester Maddox later became governor. I'll tell you something else about the sit-ins that happened a little later on. Dick Gregory used to come to town, and me and Julian used to get up in the morning. He stayed at the Peachtree Manor Hotel downtown, which was the only place black people could stay really downtown. And it was before Pascal's, or around the time Pascal's, so he didn't stay at Pascal's, he stayed at Peachtree Manor. And we used to go down there early in the morning, and we'd go out to Hoddle Houses, which were these small restaurants, you know, counter restaurants all around the city. And we'd sit in there, and at the time, the police wouldn't arrest you. They would just come out and ask you to leave and close the restaurant. So they couldn't serve anybody else. So we do that every morning, go out and, you know, sit in restaurants. And one morning it snowed, and so we went down there and got Dick Gregory, and as we were coming out to go out, a car got stuck right in front of the hotel, and its wheels were spinning and couldn't get down. So Dick Gregory, who had on this beautiful full-length leather coat, said he would help the guy, and he'd push the guy, help him get out. So he went in the back, pushed the guy, and got him out. And the guy opened the door and flipped him a quarter and said, "Thank you." So that's the way things were those days.
Okay, let's talk about the movement lawyers.
Well, you know, my sister married a lawyer, Howard Moore, who they now live in California. And Howard Moore Jr. was a SNCC's lawyer. And he's a very fine lawyer. He also worked with Donald Holloway and Horace Ward. We're all in a firm together and did a lot of work for civil rights. And in fact, Howard was the person that represented my brother when he was...
Just hold on one second. We'll start over on that part. Hi, how are you?
How are y'all?
Everything all right?
Yeah.
Oh, he wants him to wear that.
Yeah.
Okay.
He said the gold one, but I'm pretty sure he's talking about that one. 'Cause that's where it works, right?
Yeah. Okay. You want to wear both?